Hello, welcome to Perspectiva. I'm Tom Philpot. Now, fears of a renewed conflict in the Middle East have intensified after the United States launched dozens of airstrikes on targets in Iran, saying the operation is carrying out in retaliation for the attacks on commercial vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Well, according to the US military, the strikes targeted Iranian air defense systems, command and control facilities, coastal radar sites, anti-ship missile capabilities, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard core naval assets. Now, Washington says the objective was to protect international shipping and deter further attacks on maritime traffic. Iran has strongly condemned the strikes, calling them a violation of the existing memorandum of understanding that had paused major hostilities and paved the way for ongoing peace negotiations. Now, Tehran responded by announcing strikes against the US military installations in Bahrain and Kuwait and warned it would continue to defend its sovereignty against what it described as aggression. Well, the latest escalation has cast serious doubts over the future of the US-Iran diplomacy. Speaking at the NATO summit in Ankara, Donald Trump said he believes the peace memorandum is effectively over, although he didn't reject the possibility of further negotiations. His remarks have increased uncertainty over whether diplomatic efforts can survive the latest exchange of military action. The renewed confrontation has also unsettled global markets. Oil prices surged as investors worried about the security of the Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant share of the world's energy supplies passes. Now, stock markets fell while demand for safe haven assets increased, reflecting concerns that a prolonged conflict could disrupt global trade and fuel inflation. Now, regional governments have also reacted with alarm. Gulf states, including Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman and the UAE, have all condemned the attacks in their territories and called for restraint, while urging all parties to return to dialogue to prevent a wider regional war. Now, analysts say that the coming days will be critical. If both Washington and Tehran limit further military action, diplomatic channels may still remain open. However, any additional attacks on the shipping, the military bases, or even regional allies, this could trigger a broader confrontation, threatening stability all across the Middle East and increasing risks for the global economy. But for now, the region remains on edge as the international community watches closely for signs of either renewed diplomacy or further escalation. Well, to help us break down the geopolitical fallout, the collapse of the peace memorandum, we're joined by Dr. Mark Morowitz, who's an expert on the US and foreign policy. Dr. Morowitz, welcome to Perspectiva. So the United States says its strikes were in response to attacks on commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran says Washington violated the peace memorandum. From your assessment, what triggered this latest escalation?
Well, I think that what you have here, literally, is ships passing in the night, to use a maritime analogy, in the sense that you have the MOU, which the United States says is over, and think it's still in effect, and the Iranians are interrupting vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. So I would say it's an unbelievable mess what we have here. What triggered it, I think clearly from the United States point of view, is Iranian actions. But what's really happening here is that the president was at the NATO summit focusing on those issues and matters related to Turkey and so forth. And then this situation had never been resolved. And we're right back to where we are, square one. It reminds me of one of these board games that you play, and you have to return to the original point and start the game again and move your piece around the board. And this is what we're doing. We make some progress, we do an MOU, and then we go right back to the beginning and we start all over again. We're talking about the exact same issues again and again. Why is that? And I think certainly I believe it's Iranian actions that precipitated this. But also, I think the president is distracted, and he has a lot on his plate. And, going back and forth from issue to issue is very complicated. Also, I would say that as President Trump said in one of the press conferences in Ankara, he said the issue is denuclearization of Iran. No more nukes. Iran, however, has not focused on that. They have put their energy on the Strait of Hormuz. which in all candor is not part of this deal. So we're ending up with the same scenario that we had when we started all this, and we have the same situation, and we're actually not making any progress.
Mark, Donald Trump had suggested that the US-Iran peace understanding may be over. Has diplomacy effectively collapsed, or is there still room for negotiations to prevent a wider conflict?
I mean, again, it's hard to predict the future, but we kind of have been there in the same situation before, and the president basically said he wanted dialogue. Now, this time around, when he was asked about it, he basically castigated the Iranians and said they're loco, they don't know what they're doing, I don't understand them. So there is a tremendous gap of, let's say, I'll call it credibility in terms of the Iranians, because I think the frustration on the part of the president is he's, I think, tried in good faith, sent negotiators, including the vice president, that's a very high level person, to try to negotiate something. And from the beginning, it's been an utter frustration, I think, for the president to try to work this out. So can we have dialogue? I would be cautiously optimistic that they're going to try to reach some kind of a deal. But again, it really depends on Iran and what it's going to end up doing. It has to commit to sit down in negotiations directly with the United States and work up something on the nuclear issue. That is the focus of the president. If they're not going to do that, and we're going to have all these distractions, which is Lebanon and the Strait of Hormuz and all these other issues, we will never, ever, ever get to a conclusion, I say regretfully and sadly.
And Iran has responded by targeting the US military assets in Bahrain and Kuwait. Just how serious, Mark, is the risk that this confrontation could expand into a broader regional war involving other countries?
Once again, it's kind of deja vu. I mean, we've been there with this, where Iran was targeting the allies, the military assets around the area in the region. We've been there, done that, and we're right back to square one again on that as well. So yes, I do agree with you. The potential of expanding this is always there, and it's hard to say. Now, what's the countervailing factor on the other side is the timing of this, and from the domestic politics issue, which is the president is concerned about, the basic issue. Number one, midterm elections coming up in November, and oil prices, shipping, potential, issues, disruptions. All of those issues are still there, and they're very, very high on, I think, on the president's concern. So it's really kind of balancing the whole thing. But to answer your point, yeah, sure, we could expand it and contract it, and we've been there. We've been through this again, and we keep repeating the same exact scenario. So again, the answer is we don't know what the future will hold, but we've seen the past, and it is problematic, to be sure.
Mark, we all know the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most important energy corridors. If tensions continue, what impact could this have on global oil supplies, shipping, and the international economy?
Well, basically, the Strait of Hormuz is very, very significant. In my opinion, it is really not a central, I mean, it never was the central issue. The central issue from the United States point of view was the nuclear issue on the part of Iran in terms of removing their enriched material and also having them stop their progress to a nuclear bomb. What's going on Strait of Hormuz, yes, absolutely. You could end up with shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, which is essentially where we are, ships that are stuck there, international shipping coming to a halt, and no resolution of that. And the idea that, that fees can be charged for transit through the Strait of Hormuz is really, it's kind of outrageous, because it's an international strait, and transit passage through international straits is guaranteed free passage by international law. So yes, the answer to your very good question is yes. There could be a tremendous impact again, which will impact global oil supplies, oil prices, shipping, and the international economy. No doubt about it. And that's the lever that Iran has, which they keep using. And regretfully, we never get to a conclusion and we never get to the direct negotiation, which was the basis of the MOU, which, as you say, President Trump says it's over. So we sit here and scratch our heads and try to figure out where we are. Hard to know.
And Mark, I was going to say several Gulf states have also condemned the attacks. But what role can regional powers, say, such as Saudi Arabia and Oman, play in reducing tensions and reviving dialogue?
Well, I mean, certainly the Gulf states have a lot of influence, but the question is, to what extent do they influence the president? They do. All these regional powers are very, very important and have influence in Washington. They want this to end, but at the same time, again, trying to have Iran come to the table with direct negotiations with Pakistani mediators, directly talking about this. That's the way to go about it. Any other road around that is not constructive. So yes, those regional powers have lots of influence with the president, but I think the president is hard pressed to and frustrated in terms of trying to work this up. I think in good faith, the president said originally, I want dialogue, I want diplomacy. Okay, so we did that, and so we ended up with what we keep ending up with, which is the repeat of the movie, which is we have Iran again doing what it's doing in the Strait, etc., using pressure and leverage to try to get again to move it along. I think to postpone it, so it gets closer and closer to the midterm elections, and also, in addition, that it also creates turmoil in the economy, which puts pressure on the president.
And Mark, how might these renewed strikes affect the security situation across the wider Middle East, say including Iraq, Syria, Lebanon and the Gulf, where the US forces and Iranian-backed groups all still remain active?
I couldn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Yes, of course. Let me repeat that. So, yes, basically, how might these renewed strikes affect the security situation across the wider Middle East, including countries like Iraq and Syria, where there's US forces and Iranian-backed groups still active in the area?
Well, this is absolutely excellent question. The entire region is being destabilized by this. There's no question about it. And again, to me, this relates to credibility about Iran. Iran's credibility to, in fact, come to do a peace deal focused on the nuclear issue. But as you point out, there is a very, very problematic scenario in the Middle East with the where U.S. forces are located and Iranian-backed groups are active, and the potential there for calamity is there, and it is a lever and a fulcrum that Iran is using in order to get its way. Again, back to basics, very simple. Course number 101, back to basics 101. Sit down, direct negotiations, Pakistani mediators, sitting together, talking together, working it out, and stop stop the procrastination and the postponement and the lack of attention. I think on the Iranian side, I think that Trump is frustrated.
And finally, Mark, looking ahead, just what indicators should us, the international community, watch for in the coming days?
I don't hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yes, so looking ahead, Mark, so what indicators should the international community watch in the coming days to determine whether the region is moving towards de-escalation and diplomacy or a prolonged military confrontation?
Well, it's hard to know what the prognosis is for the future. I think what we need to watch here is, I think, Iran's willingness to work something out with President Trump. And it's hard to know. I'm a little befuddled why it is that maybe it is because Iran has internal power struggles in terms of who's in control. Very hard to assess that. You could see the president's frustration at the NATO summit. I mean, his frustration was very, very clear. and then he launched the strikes again. So, again, I don't think that's his motivation. He did send the negotiators for the MOU. He did work that out in good faith, notwithstanding the fact it is an MOU, a letter of intent. Notwithstanding the MOU itself is highly confusing and ambiguous. But he said, all right, let's just get something done and let's get a negotiation going and let's do this. So I think if I were Trump, I would still be trying to do that. And maybe his thinking is if he does some military action, he will get Iran back to the table seriously. That's what needs to happen. But the Iranians certainly understand Strait of Hormuz, global economy, shipping, oil prices, looking at the prices, that's the key, the stock market. And we are now in July, August, September, October, November. That's about 5 minutes away from the November midterm elections, which are crucial to President Trump's legacy. As long as this goes on, there is a real risk that the president will, his party will lose the November midterm elections in the Congress, in the House, and that will be the end, I think, of the president's legacy if the Democrats take control. So he has all these moving parts, and he's also frustrated. Now, I think his frustration is justified because he's really tried to work something out here. But the other side is not willing to sit down, I don't think, sufficiently to work this up in a way that is satisfactory to all parties and to the region and to peace and to stability.
Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate your time today.